Hello, I am back for episode 3 of On Music. I am still exploring my lifelong connection with the band Black Sabbath, and I'm listening to them even as we speak for inspiration. I'm going to turn it down a tiny tad here. Oh, I'm turning it up. Whoops. There we go. That's a little better. But, I'd love to crank it really loud, but then you won't hear me, and you probably wouldn't be able to make out the music anyway. Just be a big slosh of noise. So, anyway, when I left off, I was talking about how I picked up the album Seventh Star when it first came out. And, that was kind of like an against all odds kind of album because, with the exception of Tony Iommi, of course, and keyboard guy Jeff Nichols, the entire band was different than the last album. And it was the first album in their career without Geezer Butler on bass. He's not around. He's not writing lyrics. He's not. He's not there. He named the band, by the way, Black Sabbath, after the Mario Bava film. Um, so yeah, it's pretty weird. He was such an integral part of the whole concept of Black Sabbath, and he and Tony were this kind of formidable axis of sound and imagery, and then he's gone. And but anyway, Dave Spitz took over. I mean, it was kind of a long evolution. I'll get into that when I get into the history of the band, which I'm going to do in a couple of episodes. A couple of episodes from now, I'll get to that. But there was an evolution of lineups, but essentially Geezer was the major component that was out of the mix first, because um, Ian Gillan did have a replacement when he left after the Born Again tour. Ian Gillan went back to Deep Purple. They did a reunion album and tour, Perfect Strangers, which was a fine album in its own right. It was no Born Again, and he had changed his vocal style quite a bit from Born Again. When I talk about when I first heard Born Again, we'll get into all that, but it was all over the map. No chronological order, non-linear. I apologize if you can't keep up. It's not you, it's me, as they say. Um, so um, yeah. So anyway, Ian Gillan had a replacement called David Donato, and they recorded a few demos together, and it was still pretty much Iommi, Butler, Ward, and Jeff Nichols on keys, as it had been for most of the 1980s, from like '79 on, with the exception of about a year and a half where Vinny Appice was the drummer on Mob Rules and Live Evil, maybe 2 years, but um, pretty much from '79 up to about '84 ish. It was still the instrumental core lineup that had appeared on Heaven and Hell and Born Again. So, and the three core members that had appeared on the first 8 albums as well. So changes in the music, people have complained over the years, like whenever Sabbath changed a vocalist or whatever, that the music changed or whatever. But really, the musical changes have generally been uh, the architects of those changes have generally been Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, in tandem, making those decisions for the band. Um, Now, Dio did temper the writing a bit with a bit more melody and a bit more traditional kind of choruses and things like that, which of course Ozzy did on his solo work. His solo work kind of started out as fairly classy neoclassical metal and kind of degenerated into kind of smarmy pop music. And sorry, I just not a fan of Ozzy's solo material, except for those first 2 albums, Diary of a Madman. Uh, but especially the first one, Blizzard of Oz, I think is an absolute fucking classic. But not just because of Ozzy. I mean, largely because of the writing of Bob Daisley and Randy Rhoads, and great playing by those guys, and Lee Kerslake on drums and Don Airey on keyboards. Um, Great band. But Don Airey, by the way, had appeared as keyboard player on Never Say Die album with Black Sabbath. So that's how they he and Ozzy hooked up. Um, I'm all over the map now. So yeah, like around 1984, there was this kind of temporary lineup, and Bill Ward was disgruntled and he was coming and going, but he generally stuck in with Tony, much as he had after when Geezer quit in 1979 for a while. Um, but essentially, Donato didn't work out, and with good reason. I don't really particularly care for his demos. His material isn't that strong, and a lot more of a generic kind of vocal style to Sabbath. But again, Tony was kind of leaning in that direction toward a little bit more mainstream metal, a little more trying to keep the sound kind of up to date with the 80s, as what's happening with melodic metal, um, for better or worse. For better is when his solo album congealed and he got um, Gordon Copley and Eric Singer on bass and drums from his then fiancee Lita Ford's band. Gordon Copley though only recorded one bass on one track, which was "No Stranger to Love," the single, um, and then was replaced or left or whatever. But his replacement was Dave Spitz, Dave the Beast Spitz. I think he has this brother who's a musician named Dan Spitz, but for the life of me, I'm having trouble remembering what band Dan was in. Dave was the guy who kind of talked a lot of smack back then about what a great player he was, but it's really funny because even though he doesn't really do a lot of tremendous work on the album, especially compared to Geezer Butler or even Copley on that one song, um, his lines aren't really that memorable. But you listen to live recordings of that band on tour, and he's just killing it, you know. So I got to give Dave some credit. I mean, he may not be the beast, but you know, he was a beast. Um, so my thoughts on that album, like I said, when it came out, I really loved it. And but you know, we had evolved past that period, you know, to where it really kind of in a lot of ways wasn't Black Sabbath anymore. Black Sabbath in a way was on hold, but the record company kind of intervened and was like, Tony, you know, you owe us X, Y, Z. I believe it was still Warner Brothers that he was on for many, many years. And sometime around this time or shortly thereafter, Tony like copyrighted or trademarked or whatever the name Black Sabbath. So he kind of bought all the rights to the name and decided, you know, once he went on tour with the Seven Star album, he kind of decided to keep the name and etc. But you know, it seemed like that band was going to stay fairly tight. But unfortunately, Glenn Hughes, who sang on the album, had all kinds of vocal and substance abuse issues at the time. And so even though he sounds beautiful in the album, the 6 shows he did on the tour kind of fizzled. So they swiftly replaced him with this guy named Ray Gillen, Gillen, not related to Ian Gillan, Gillan. Um, Ray Gillen to me was, I didn't really hear a huge amount of his take on things until years later because, you know, the bootlegs weren't as readily available back then, no internet, etc. Back in like 1986, 1987. So I didn't really have an opinion on Ray Gillen, but I kept reading in Kerrang and some other metal magazines and music magazines in general that they were going to go ahead and do a follow up to Seven Star as a more cohesive band, and the same lineup was going to remain with Ray Gillen on vocals now, and they recorded the album. Well, the album recording wasn't as smooth as they kind of let on. The lineup started shifting around again. Uh, Again, there was a lot of hearsay. You know, nobody really knew what was going on, and it seemed as though Iommi was kind of becoming the not just the central figure of the band, but kind of an egomaniac in a way. I mean, you know, he not only did he kind of take the name and mantle Black Sabbath upon himself alone, without I don't think much consultation with Butler or Ward. Um, but not only that, but he claimed writing credits on Seventh Star, which turned out to be incorrect. I mean, he did write all the music on the album, but he didn't write any of the lyrics. And then the same thing popped up with Eternal Idol. So where I was at with Sabbath is the year between Seventh Star and Eternal Idol, the next LP. Um, Back when we called them LPs, long players. I was filling in the gaps in my collection. So I was buying a lot of cassettes, and a decisive one for me, no doubt. Well, there were two, like, I guess three. Yeah, there were three I didn't have, so there were three very decisive ones for me. One was Sabotage, which a friend of mine, Chris Pack, had been telling me, hey, Sabotage, it's the best Black Sabbath album. He did kind of talk like that. He kind of like Yogi the Bear meets Norton of the Honeymooners, Art Carney. And so he did kind of have that, hey, kind of thing. And he was, lauding Sabotage. And of course, I loved like Sabbath. They were my favorite band, but I still had not heard Sabotage all the way through. He played me a little pieces here and there, Symptom of the Universe, which I'd only heard Ozzy's live version of, and I wasn't really impressed with. Um, but anyway, I picked the album up on cassette initially, and it blew my mind. I mean, I think it's probably the single finest statement issued by the Iommi Butler Ward Osborne aggregate. It's to me pretty definitive. It's 6 albums in, and they're like a full-on prog metal band. They're doing whatever the hell they want to. Commerciality be damned, because they're probably going to sell it anyway because they're Black Sabbath and they'd already become just a huge world-conquering juggernaut of a band. But Sabotage, to me, is a defining album, not only of the band, but of metal and of rock music, maybe in some ways. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's putting it on a really high pedestal, but uh, it was kind of continuing the lyrical patterns of established on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and the kind of longer songs with all kinds of different shifts in tone and instrumentation and dynamics from heavy to soft and back and forth. A lot of kind of soul searching lyrics from Geezer Butler. And yeah, my friend Chris was right. It was amazing. Sometime around that time, I picked up Born Again. So finally had Born Again, and I was prepared to hate it, but it kind of blew my mind. And the first 3 songs I thought were very strong. Trash was not a cheesy, stupid pop metal song glorifying alcoholism as I somehow thought it was. Though it was talking a bit about alcohol abuse, but my friend Doug Williams was correct in his assessment that it was a deeper song than I was giving it credit for, having not heard it. It's being overly prejudiced. The next 2 tracks on the album were back to the kind of heavy, moody, complex kind of arrangements that they were really doing before Dio came in the band, and before the last couple of Ozzy albums. But during that mid period, in a lot of ways, Born Again was their first kind of progressive sounding album since Sabotage. I can't say it's a sequel to Sabotage. Tonally, totally different. The thing is, it is their heaviest record. I mean, there's one or two that come close, but um, it is like embracing the whole metal image of Sabbath, the whole satanic devil worshipping imagery, as on the album cover. They were back to that with the satanic baby. Disturbing the Priest, one of the songs, is pretty intense song, and this is about good and evil and religion. And as far as I know, Ian Gillan wrote all the lyrics on the album, though Geezer Butler may have, jumped in to help here and there in arrangements with the lyrics. But as far as I know, the words are Gillan's. And hearing really uh, interesting and almost occultish or very occultish songs that Ian Gillan has written lyrics for over the years, like Abbey of Thelema or Not Mules, well, Mules and The Fool, both by Deep Purple, on the same album, Fireball. Um, you can kind of see uh, his interest in that area. He's got a real classic Englishman kind of predilection with the occult. He's kind of like the rock uh, bridge between Aleister Crowley and Alan Moore. I know, just off the top of my head, but thinking about the tradition he's in and the way he writes and the way he looks, I mean, I looked then anyway with this extremely long jet black hair and this kind of dour appearance, when actually seemed like a pretty jolly guy. Um, yeah, Gillan is a motherfucker. He's really one of the crucial figures in rock, and it's definitely one of the most crucial figures in hard rock and heavy metal music. Between Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and his solo stuff, um, he just has a remarkable body of work. Um, I also think he has a lot of integrity. He pretty much does whatever he wants to do. He's done very commercial music, and he's done very uncompromising, uncommercial music. I mean, his solo band, the Ian Gillan band, his first solo band after Deep Purple, um, was a prog rock jazz fusion band, and musicianship was top notch, and the arrangements were killer. Lyrics were fascinating. They only did 2 or 3 albums, and then he regrouped. I think he may have kept one of the members, or may not. May have assembled an entirely new band called Gillan, which was a lot heavier, more frantic, more frenzied, and was kind of riding the crest of the then nascent new wave of British heavy metal. Bands of which were coming out like Iron Maiden, Saxon, Samson, Bruce Dickinson sang for before he was in Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, which ultimately turned out really not to be any kind of metal band at all, but and a bunch of other bands that my brain, like Tigers of Pentang and with John Sykes, and a whole bunch of them, the super group Gog Magog, um, which came after Iron Maiden, but still early in that phase. But yeah, so Ian Gillan, by the time he got to Born Again, he was really into the heaviness, and it's really just it's mind bending. And so when I heard side one on the cassette, and I had to flip it over, um, when I get into side two and we get into the song Born Again, I think it's the second song on side two, after Digital Bitch. Another one I had written off as being stupid, probably, but it was actually intense and very heavy, incredible. Sound kind of like Tony Iommi was finally maybe using a whammy bar, which I don't really recall him using before, though he could have achieved that effects in other ways. He was a master of getting the certain distortion sounds, but bending the strings and bending the neck and doing all kinds of shit that he worked into the actual writing of the riffs. Like Iron Man, of course, is a classic example of that. But second track on side two of Born Again, it's called Born Again. And I will say unreservedly, it became my, I guess, second favorite Black Sabbath song after Children of the Sea. When I was listening to the album the first time, it had been pretty heavy, or at least up and down heavy, moody heavy. Born Again had a different vibe, a different sound, the guitar sound. He was using some very different effects. It sounded kind of like a flanger and a chorus, along with his usual kind of, distortion and wah wah, but it was like not much distortion. It was just more of that this kind of down, this kind of cavernous kind of sound with the chords and kind of chugging along with not much distortion. Um, and then when the song peaks, it's like he hits this riff and Ian Gillan is just wailing. It's unbelievable. Ian Gillan couldn't even match his own work on the album on the subsequent tour. He was hitting notes and singing lines that were so difficult to attain. I mean, the most difficult he had done since the Deep Purple's version of Child in Time, the original version. Um, so then the next two songs on that album were like really heavy and again kind of conventional lyrically, but still pretty heartfelt, pretty cool. Still some staggering vocal uh, gymnastics here and there, and just frenzied, powerful work from the band. So yeah, I mean, so when I first listened to it, I was exhausted. You know, I was like, wow, you know, I had this album all wrong and this whole lineup, and now it's like long passed away. Um, so you know, next I finally picked up Technical Ecstasy, the seventh album, with the original lineup still intact, and with Jeff, what's his name? Jez is his nickname. Gerald Woodruff on keyboards and synthesizers and piano, and I have really liked his work with the group. I thought he was a phenomenal addition, and they almost made him a full member of the band. But that was again kind of the direction they were going in with more keyboards. They'd always utilized, well, not always, but I mean, ever since like say, uh, certainly Volume Four, they had used some keyboards here and there, and then of course they came way to the forefront on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath with Rick Wakeman from Yes playing them, and he became like a lifelong friend of the band. Um, to where his son Adam Wakeman later played with them, much later. Um, but then Gerald Woodruff kind of took over the keyboards and did a really amazing um, job with the group. And then after he parted with the group, they used Don Airy on Never Say Die, and then got Jeff Nichols. But basically, with Technical Ecstasy was more of a up to that time, it was the most conventional album they made. The song structures, it was more conventional, more straight ahead, rock, hard rock kind of stuff. But it was extremely heavy hard rock though, and lyrics were still pretty strong for just about the whole album. Again, Geezer was doing some amazing things, but it was shifting. It was shifting focus. The songs were shorter and tighter, but some of them stretched out, and a few of them had some amazing long instrumental passages and incredible solos, like the Gypsy and You Won't Change Me. Both have just amazing guitar work. The whole album has amazing guitar work. It's some of Tony's best lead work on any album ever. I mean, he's soaring on every song. Um, Around this time, the inner tensions with the band were starting to really kind of weigh on them, and Ozzy was kind of eager to go his own way, and so he doesn't appear on one of the songs, "It's All Right," which Bill Ward sings, and of course Bill Ward is just as far as just traditional vocals go. I mean, he's a much finer singer than Ozzy. He's not as nearly as distinctive as Ozzy is in his sound, quality of his voice, but the actual ability, singing ability and range, he's quite a bit better. But we only get like a taste of that on "It's All Right," and it's a good song. And they even did a video of it. Sans Ozzy, and so it's like they were phasing Ozzy kind of out of the band. And when some of their touring obligations, I think, wrapped up, um, Ozzy quit the band and went out to form his Blizzard of Oz band. Um, so that seemed to be permanent. But things have a way of changing. So when I get into the history of the band, I'll talk about that in slightly more linear order fashion. Um, so I finally had the whole catalog of Black Sabbath up to Seventh Star. Now was collecting them on vinyl. I had them all on cassette, and now I was getting them all on vinyl. And so I was ready for that follow up to Seventh Star. So I think we're about up to speed now with where we need to be as far as me being up to date with Sabbath as the albums were coming out. So I'll continue with that next time. We'll get into Eternal Idol and the follow-ups for a bit and talk about a totally new era with Black Sabbath with a new long-term vocalist that we haven't discussed as of yet at all. And I promise I'll talk about that Black Sabbath website. If not next episode, the one after. I'm definitely getting to it. I meant to do it this time, and again, if I remember, I'll put the link down here at the bottom. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon.